Welcome to our month 2 closeout of the Energy Sovereignty Project. You didn't beat us up last month about the format, so we're going to go ahead and follow the same method where it's going to be, this month it'll be 28 days and 29 minutes, where you'll be able to go to each minute of the video and be able to see the corresponding day. And so I better shut up and get to it, so grab a drink and let's get to our month 2 closeout. Well, here we are, starting off on the first partially cloudy day, quite a bit of rain, and you can see that we're looking at about 12.7 kilowatt hours of production. Pretty good for the amount of rain that we have. And so then, too, you'll watch these symbols, and the symbols correlate pretty well to what was produced. The symbols at the top were what was actually happening on that day. They may not represent the forecast, but in general the forecast was pretty close to what we saw. And again, not a whole lot to show in the notes here, just that we were ending a 10-day run with the system in backup mode, and we're starting to come into some days where we had some rainy weather. On the second, again, you can see that it's a similar type of a situation, similar symbol. This was a 15 kilowatt hour day, so generally between 10 and 15 kilowatts up to 20 for this 20 kilowatts for this type of weather. The predictions have been pretty good. We base our predictions, as I'll talk a little bit about later, we base our predictions on the percentages that the forecast shows for how much cover over any given area represents clouds that could deliver rain. February 3rd, you can see that see what's going on with that total solar day percentage. The production at 16 kilowatts. The home use, what you'll notice here, is that it's 63 and 31. Well, the 31.8 was after I subtracted. This was Super Bowl Sunday, so I had a friend of mine over that from out of town that had an electric vehicle, and we charged his vehicle off of the home, and so that's why you've got that kind of double thing going on there. We'll mention that there in the notes as well. But 31 kilowatt hours of usage. That also is a little high for this time of year. But again, it was Super Bowl Sunday, friends over, a lot of cooking going on, that kind of thing. February 4th. Again, rainy, and again, I think what you'll see right there is into that 10 to 20 kilowatt hour range this time of year. Seems to be pretty consistent for a day that is predicted to be partially sunny with rain. And then what you'll notice later on here as we go, you'll see some of those symbols where there will be no rain but partially cloudy. Generally those days give us in the 15 to 25 kilowatt hour range, sometimes as high as 30, but generally 20 to 25 is what's dependable. And again, we were doing pretty good. We had a lot of days that were banging, and so we went ahead and put the system back into zombie apocalypse mode at the end of our total solar day, and you can see that symbol then appears in February 5th. We got a partially cloudy day. We're in zombie apocalypse mode. Good production, 30 kilowatt hours, and again, just like I was saying, that's pretty typical. What when you see that symbol at the top, you're looking at a day that's going to produce generally between 25 and 30 kilowatts, sometimes in the lower region, sometimes in the 20 region. But if there's no rain, it usually doesn't go below 20 kilowatt hours. Some notes there. Again, cold and clear. You get those cool, clear days. If you get even a little bit of clearing right when you have peak production, it really shows. February 6th, again, still in zombie apocalypse mode. Starting off at 37%, ending the total solar day at 65%. Good production, 32.7 kilowatt hours. No clouds. Again, you'll see that symbol, the sun symbol. This time of year, generally it had been going between 30 and 37, 30, 35, 30, 37. You'll see a little bit later on that over the course of just a few days, we had a massive change, and that has to do with the angle of the sun and our particular setup, where we have several panels that are not set up in an optimal position, and so it doesn't take many days before all of a sudden, boom, you get this large increase. All right. So again, cold and sunny, a little hazy, so that limited a little bit the production. But right in there with what we had been expecting in that 30 to 35 kilowatt hour range, 30, 37. February 7th, again, that partially cloudy. Remember what I said earlier, when there's no rain, get you in that 20 to 30 kilowatt hour range. And what you'll see as we go through this month, man, that's really been consistent. And so we'll do another baseline in March to see where we're kind of sitting. But right in this shoulder period, it's just been very, very predictable. And it'll be interesting when we go towards October, November in this period as we leave summer. I'm going to try and do some more seasonal predictions going off of what our solar maximum and solar minimum is. Remember we spoke about the summer and winter solstice. So in February 8th, you can see that sunny with rain, boom, right in there, 19.2. Right at the upper end there. Not much to say about this really. That's pretty good production. 19.2 produced, 26 used. We're still in zombie apocalypse mode. Everything's kind of holding that equilibrium for now. But yeah, I've been really surprised at how predictable it is. You look at the percentage of coverage of rain clouds over your area, and you can pretty closely predict what's going to go on. Again, like we saw, the partially sunny with rain, you get into that 10 to 20 kilowatt hour range there. 13.5 produced, 23.5 used. Ending the solar day at 36. Now watch this solar day, because this, that's one of our key indicators, like we talked about before. Some of the things to really watch is, what were you coming into the day? Here we were 34, and what are you coming out? 36. It went up, but not by much. We didn't have a lot of production, and again, as the notes show here, it's a rainy day, a little more overcast. Overcast was increasing. And so now I put down there that the goal was to try and get to 40%. We didn't quite make that. We did on February 10th. And again, we wound up exceeding our expectations a little bit on this day. We went to 31.3. Generally on a day where there is rain, a decent amount of rain, the is generally between 20 and 30 kilowatt hours. So we exceeded it just a little bit. Pretty good production day. And again, it all comes down to, when does the sun present itself? If you get unlucky and you get those rain clouds right at the peak period in the day, man, that really collapses your production. But on the opposite end of it, like we saw here, surprising amount of production. And that all had to do with how much cloud cover there was right during that peak production time. February 11th, again, still in zombie apocalypse mode. But now look at the, the production. This again in that generally 30 to 37 kilowatt hour range when there is no rain, and again that matches up quite nicely with what we saw there. Home usage of 22.7, so again we're still on the climb. This was quite a long run in zombie apocalypse mode, in our backup mode. It's a good thing to see. It was a good test. Again, the notes pretty much say the same thing. Not much to say about it. Surprised I didn't put in when the cloud clearing was. On the 12th, again, still in zombie apocalypse mode. We have sun and rain. And again, that generally puts us in the 10 to 20 kilowatt hour expectation. We hit exactly on the minimum for that, right around 10 kilowatt hours. But now the important thing to take away here is look at our total solar day percentage. We ended the day with 28%. Well, we know we're going to burn 20% that night. From the time that total solar day is completed till the time we get first production. And here's another interesting thing on this day, and I'm sure I made a note of it as well, is you'll notice that we didn't increase at all. We started at 28, we ended at 28. And the reason for that is that some days you just wind up using power right when you're producing it, and that was one of those days. We didn't make much. It was an overcast day, and we used the power just as we were creating it. February 13th, nasty day, high rains, a lot of wind. And remember, we're talking about that depletion. Well, we also depleted a little bit extra during the evening, it looks like. And so instead of ending with an expectation of 8%, which would have been where we would have expected to end at 28, we wound up starting the total solar day at, starting solar production of that day at 2%, and crap production, and we ended it at 4. We are not going to make it to the next day, boys and girls, and so we took the system off of zombie apocalypse mode. We actually did that the day before, just on the off chance that something like this would happen. And again, that's what we can see by the notes here, that it was taken off of zombie apocalypse mode and put on a reserve of 10%. And the production was so low that we didn't even make that. And now you start, I'm going to close off with that a little bit at the end of this video. We're talking a little bit more about what we learned about how we set those percentages. But so now again, next day, February 14th, just, nasty weather. But here's the thing, it doesn't always line up. And so now on a day when we would expect to produce very little, what happened? Well, it was nasty in the morning, and it was nasty like you read about in the evening. But for that period where there was production, the sun's up in the sky, we wind up getting those breaks, and we did 20 kilowatt hours. Pretty impressive. Ending the total solar day at 18. Now, here again, we take a look at these notes. So what I did on the 18th, again, we were still learning a little bit about how to set these things. I set it at 10% reserve to give us that little bit of a bump. I should have set it at 20%. But no matter, we barely made it to the next day. Even at 18%, we didn't use quite as much as we had in the previous evenings on the that night. Finished, we started the next day, started on the 15th at 0%. And so then we managed to reach our 20% goal. And again, that 20% goal is for our system. Everybody else's system will vary as far as that percentage goes. In the case of our system, if we hit 20%, then we'll be able to make it from the end of total solar day to when production starts the next day and not have to worry about a power outage. And again, here you see the system was set to a 0% reserve to allow that to completely deplete. And it did. And so then the following day I'd set it to 10% reserve to make sure that we give it that little help. And so for those days you can see that when you look on those days that we did wind up drawing just a little bit from the grid. And we had recovered pretty well, even though we started the day at 1%, barely making it. But we ended at 25, which is enough to make it to the following day. But again, there's that set point. We know that we're going to have to set the reserve to 0 so that we end at, in this case, our expectation is that we would end around 5%. And again, it's showing in the notes. We were doing an experiment here where we were just trying to see what the system would do recovering naturally. And again, we were expecting 5%, and that's exactly what we got. Partially sunny day with some rains. What's our expectation? On days like that, we're expecting 20 to 30 kilowatt hours. That's what we got. High end there. 28.9. System sitting at 30% by end of total solar day. So again, we know that we're going to make it. Inconsequential amounts from the grid. And here we go. Not much to speak about, just what it says. Partly cloudy day. Intermittent rain showers gave us enough of a charge to give us a pretty good, enough clearing to give us a pretty good boost. And then the 18th, still climbing slightly. Now we can see that we've got a clear day. And oh boy, so this is starting to really set those benchmarks. I was telling you that slight angle, that slight amount of change in the angle of the sun now hitting more of those panels that are at the suboptimal angle. Now we're pushing 40 kilowatt hours. And so then obviously that really shot the total solar day percentage up to the point now where I'm kind of watching. It's like, ooh, what are we going to get? What are we going to get over the next few days? Home usage is staying pretty much average what it is, in that low to mid 20s. And again, I created a benchmark day on this day because it was very clear, not a lot of haze. Good day to make that judgment call. And so again here, even though this was a partially cloudy day, because it was very cloudy in the morning, I think the notes will probably mention that. Very cloudy in the morning, but then boom, it just cleared up, and almost was tempted to list this as a sunny day, but again, it wasn't. So then that wouldn't be fair to the record, even though we got clear skies for the majority of our production time. And so again, as you see, at 39, we're banging it up. The home usage was pretty good at 28 kilowatt hours, but a lot of production. And again, just what the note says, it was cloudy weather, but not while we were producing. 20th, again, looking at that rainy with sun. Now normally that would say, well, it's going to be in that 20 to 30 kilowatt hour range. Now it was on the lower end of the 30 kilowatt hours, but again, what's predicted in the forecast isn't always what you get. And even when you're honest about what the day did, in other words, in this case, the weather forecast was accurate, but it exceeded our expectations simply because even though the forecast was accurate at clouds, rain, sun, the timing of the breaks in the weather. You get that break in the weather right between 11 and 1, and then all of a sudden that's where the lion's share of your production is. Didn't do any notes on there, it was pretty much self-explanatory. And then, wow, the next day, clear as a bell, and cool. And this again, a benchmark day. A week ago we're doing 35s, and now it's it's solidly in the 40 range. Another benchmark day. Now the solar percentage, you can see the solar day percentage is creeping up. 78%. Woo. Now we got to be careful. We get another sunny day, what's that going to do? Another sunny day, if we get another sunny day predicted, well, we're lucky. We better be right there, with the, I'm lucky, as I was going to say, I'm right there with the car charger I can plug in. But if you're at work, then you're running the risk of shunting some of the power to the grid if you're not there to plug the car in. And so then again, the 22nd, boom, another banner day. We produced 40 kilowatt hours. That drove us up to 90%. And now obviously, if we're at 90% today, another sunny day would push us over the edge. And so now it becomes really important to take a close look at what is what's our forecast. And so the forecast for the following day, I believe, was partially cloudy. We'll see that in a second here. Again, starting with nearly 60% high output. I put us nearly to 100%. It's 90, but again, the reason I wrote it that way is that it gets us into that mindset of be careful. So now the next day, partially sunny. Okay, we started the day at 71. And again, those days, typically, cloudy, we're looking at between 20 and 30 kilowatt hours. And this one wound up being on the lower end, but right in with the expectations. Produced 23, used 25. So that allowed our total solar day to kind of settle into that 86% mark. Still comfortable, but another sunny day and that'll pop us over the top. Well, the forecast wasn't in that direction. The forecast was in a more rainy direction. And so then the following day, as you can see, another partially cloudy day. Expectations for those right in, these are setting our expectations pretty clearly. And again, at the end of the month, we were really starting to use those. And I'll talk a little bit when we close out this video about how I shifted from a 10% reserve to a 20% reserve and why I did that. I'll talk a little bit about that. But in general, I had been shifting between 10% if you feel that you need just a little nudge on a day like today where you're going to produce right around what you use. You might want to set that reserve percentage at 10%, so then it'll give you a little bit of help. Then once you get above that 10% mark, then it goes back into that self-powered mode where you're trickling in your power. But then again, like I said, you look at that forecast, right? So the previous day was looking, okay, you know, it was important that we hit our mark, because we know the next day is going to be rainy. Didn't do too bad, you know. The again, rain with no sun predicted on the weather forecast is a little bit more tricky to try and tease out as far as what it's actually going to do to you. In general, those rainy days between 4 and 10 kilowatt hours. So again, it's pretty, you know, pretty predictable-ish. You know, again, it doesn't generally, on days when you have lots of rain, it generally doesn't ever go above that, in our case, above that 15 kilowatt range. It's generally between 4 and 10 kilowatts. And again, here, the rainy day, you know, but again, you know, it's very changeable. The day before we had nearly 10 kilowatts, or around 10 kilowatt hours. Now here we got 3.5. Not even the 4 that we, you know, sometimes get. So it's dark, gloomy, rainy. When we look at our total solar percentage, what do we expect for tomorrow? Well, we expect that we're going to wind up with 9%. And so then we'll see what we come up with. Just a quick look at the notes there for that day. And again, the goal for tomorrow is to see what we get for a total solar day. And again, here you go, partially sunny. We started at 10%, and this was again where we were applying what we'd learned. It's really important that we get to that 20%. And so what I did was I set it at 20%, and if you'll look at the from the grid, we pulled 2.8 kilowatt hours from the grid so that we could get to 23%, then go to self-powered mode, and now we know that we'll wind up making it to the next day, and no worry about power outages. So again, this is a good application of what we've learned. And again, you can pause the video here and take a look at these notes to digest what I've written. So you start the system at 0% and build from there. Again, here we go, 28th, closing it out. We've got that partially rainy day. Again, our expectations for a day such as this is between 20 and 30 kilowatts. Boom, we're right in there, upper end. And so I'll close out this video by going back, and we'll check out some of the notes from a couple of the previous days here. We'll let this play out so that those following the format can see what we're doing. Now you can see that that's that solid 20%. So that's it. 28 days and 29 minutes. So let's close out by talking about what did we learn? Well, what did we learn? Well, what we saw in our February week 4 recap was that it's pretty clear what Tesla should be doing, and that is to allow the system to prioritize solar contribution, but also then to allow an immediate charging off of the grid that allows you to reach that point at which, again, your system may vary. In our case, it's 20%. That will allow you to reach that 20% where you'll make it to the next solar day and not have to use any power off of the grid during peak times. So that's pretty simple, you know, wash, rinse, repeat. When you're in that winter or shoulder period, that's just how the system should operate, in my humble opinion. But that's not what we have. So with what's happening now, currently, how do we set our systems? Well, we monitor the initial state of charge at the beginning, and then we take a close look at what our forecast is, and then we're able to set the system to an appropriate reserve. Now, we talked a little bit about when you set it to either the 10% or the 20% reserve. What are your goals? That depends on what the weather's doing to you. If you're in that position where you're in that partially cloudy day, then you're probably going to meet or exceed what you've used, at least in our case, meet or exceed what we're using in the home. So it's probably okay to go ahead and leave it at 0, let the system just kind of perform naturally, depending on what your percentage is. As you start to get towards the end of the day, then maybe you can adjust it. But again, there's a lag in the amount of time that it takes between when you make your adjustment and when it actually performs. Sometimes up to an hour, sometimes even more. And that's even if you can get hold of the system. So again, a lot of this needs to happen automatically. We'll talk about that maybe when we close out next month. But your decision as to whether or not you set the system for a 10 or a 20% reserve during the day is going to depend largely on what the weather is looking like for that day. If it's nasty, you want to get as close to that 20% as possible, all right, and then see where the system is at the end of your total solar day, and then act accordingly. If you didn't make it, if you're at 15% at the end of your total solar day, well, then you're going to have to leave it at that reserve perhaps for longer into the evening before setting it to 0%. And again, it's all predicated on what's the weather going to do the next day. If it's slated to be nasty, 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 and you're already at 8 or 9%, well, then discretion being the better part of valor, maybe you just go ahead and maintain that reserve in case you have a power outage. And then you kind of minimize your pain as far as that goes. But that's it. You know, we pretty much that covers what we've seen to this date. Obviously, like I said before, everybody's going to have to make their own assessment of what their own system individually is doing. Our case, it's 20%. Yours is going to vary depending on how many power walls that you have and whether you're trying to run other things off of it, what your load is, that kind of a thing. And I'll probably release a quick topic in a couple of days that will cover in detail what I feel Tesla should be doing. And I'll even maybe make up some fake screenshots to actually show what kinds of settings we actually need. We're talking very early on about how the Tesla app compares to something like the Nest app for a thermostat, all right, where you're going to need to have access to more parameters than what Tesla is currently giving you. The ones that are in the app right now, especially in the US where you can't charge off of the grid, is next to useless. And so we'll cover that as we can. But finally, I'd really like to thank those who subscribed. We're knocking at the door of 1,000 subscribers. Thanks, guys. You know, I really appreciate the folks paying attention to what's going on and the replies, the comments that we've gotten. Just been fantastic. Keep them coming. And so with that, till next time, good luck with your own systems, and we'll keep these updates flowing your way. Thanks for joining us.